So
Please.
welcome all. My name's Lorraine Copes, and I'm the founder of Be Inclusive Hospitality. I want to welcome you to another edition of Thursday Night Takeaway, which is a fortnightly web series where I have conversations with founders, leaders within the hospitality, food, and drink sector. And so I would like to hand over to today's guest. Just to introduce yourself, tell us who you are, what you do, and just tell us a bit about your business.
Yeah. So I'm Grace Ubawuchi. I'm the founder of Xin and Voltaire, and we are an alcohol company, and we make something called cocktail sorbets, which are basically the brainchild of myself and an incredible chef who helped us create them called Nina Metier.
Nice, nice. And what was the kind of transition period or the time period from you kind of forming the idea to launching the business? What was that in total?
Oh, what a story. So it pretty much was a few years because we just launched last year. So I
Right.
founded the company in 2017, and it was really at concept. So doing a lot of the grassroots stuff pretty much by myself. This was pre-investors,
Yeah.
and just doing a lot of the sourcing and understanding the market and doing my own personal research. And then
Mm.
from there, I have a little bit of a backwards story. So I worked with my investors. It was almost like a co-creation with this
Okay.
brand, yeah, which is very different from a lot of people. And we were able to kind of sit together and really come up with the concept and develop it together, and then were able to kind of go to Nina to be able to then actually physically create the products for us. But that
Mm.
time took about
Yeah.
5 years, 5 years to
Really?
do. Yeah.
Really?
So started 2017 till now,
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
now we're actually fully launched. But it took us about 2 years to develop. And
Mhm.
then from there, just getting everything with the branding and the packaging and everything. But it took some time. It wasn't an overnight process for me
It was
personally. It
okay.
feels like forever, quite frankly. I started in my early 20s, and now I'm pretty much approaching 30. So it's taken pretty much a long chunk of my 20s, which I do
Okay.
love, let me not lie.
Yeah. Good, good, good. And tell me how, having made that leap or taken that leap from perhaps being a consumer to being a brand owner, how has your perception of hospitality in the drinks industry changed, if at all,
Mm.
since launching the business?
Ah, so my perception was so
Mm.
shop window. It really wasn't from the backside and really understanding the intricacies and the complexity of the entire process. And it was, I think a lot of it was pretty much built on just me either going out and drinking with my friends and being in a restaurant, or seeing, music videos where people had alcohol, or going to restaurants. It really just was from a consumer's perspective, which
Mm.
really is not the ideal
Yeah.
full story that you know when you actually get into it. And I think my perception, there's such an appreciation that I have for people within hospitality.
Mm.
I absolutely respect everything, every little cog, every person. It's such a machine,
Yeah.
and every small place requires so much effort and time, and so many things going on behind the scenes. I outside of just my professional life, but I stay at Pan Pacific when I'm in London, and it's
Mm.
such a big hotel, but
Mm.
just every single it runs like clockwork, and just to
Mm.
see how it runs, but not just looking at it just from the perspective of being a guest, but actually understanding that those who come and clean the rooms, to those who are in the restaurant, and every single piece of everything that works within it. It's incredible. So my appreciation is it runs deep, and I'm such a polite person. Whenever someone serves me, it's like, oh no, you don't need to do this, and oh thank you so much. I absolutely have to show it, because knowing how it works, but also working with people in hospitality, there's a level of appreciation that I definitely tend to give, not just as someone who works with people in hospitality, but also as someone who is a consumer and visits a lot of these places.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. And on that, you talked about appreciation. What led you to a cocktail sorbet? Was it about what you personally like to enjoy? Like, what was it that led you there? Um,
Uh, Honestly, it first started. I'll give you the unfiltered version, and
mm,
that was me when I was in uni. I had something called pica, and that is
mhm.
an eating disorder, and you eat things
Oh,
of non-nutritional value. So I would eat
okay.
ice, and my friends would be like, "Oh, you're going to break all your teeth." And I was like, "Well, honestly, if I do, I'll probably just make all the money from whatever it is." Because my thing with ice was, I would say
Mm,
to my friends just jokingly, "Oh, it has flavor. It tastes like this, or it tastes like that." And they would laugh and just like, "This girl's not serious." But
mm,
actually, when my love for cocktails kind of coincided with my love for ice,
okay.
actually, I was like, the ice is there for a reason, but I
Yeah,
want to be able to combine absolutely everything in the cup and find a way that the ice elevates even further, and using the
yeah.
ice as a medium. So that's really where the frozen element meets the drink for me. And then really combining it and using the sorbet as a vehicle to be able to kind of change the way people consumed alcohol. That was the key for me. But I also saw, because
Mm,
my first interactions with alcohol, pursuing this, was I actually started speaking to people in the alcohol industry. So I would reach out to, crazily, people in Diageo, people at Pernod, people at Beam
mm,
Suntory, and just say,
mm,
hey, I have this idea, what are you guys doing around ice? And when I
yeah,
would read a lot of the trend reports, ice
yeah,
and frozen cocktails and frozen anything with alcohol really was a trend, and it has continued to be the trend for the last 8-9 years. But
really.
their eyes weren't on it, and I felt like, from the feedback that I was getting, it wasn't that they didn't believe it was viable, but they wanted someone to prove the concept, and they wanted
Mm,
someone to commercialize before they even took an interest. And I think, in terms of business, the business world, absolutely, it makes sense. And so that was pretty much my segue into, okay, now how do I physically create something sophisticated and something that could actually challenge how people consumed alcohol? And so
yeah,
how do you challenge it versus, instead of drinking a drink, you're now eating it? So
yeah, yeah,
that was
yeah.
really how I started it. Yeah.
Nice. And how do you find that you personally have to do a lot of research around what has been consumed in bars, um, how people are enjoying drinks and what types of drinks? Is that something that you personally do? And if so, how do you find balance?
I absolutely do.
Mm,
Like I said before, I love cocktails and the
yeah,
theater behind cocktails. And
yeah,
for me, drinking wasn't necessarily a thing that I did to get drunk. It was more of, I enjoyed the flavor. I enjoyed the construction that went into
right.
creating a beautifully crafted cocktail. So you absolutely do research. That's one of my favorite parts
Mm, sure.
of development. But
Yeah.
yeah, when it comes to, that was probably the hardest thing, because when we
Mm,
created the products, we created about 40 or 50 different flavors.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
actually being able to say which ones are the selection that people would actually love, which ones are the ones that people gravitate towards. And that was probably the
mm,
hardest decision I had to make, because it was only me making it. And
mm,
so you do the research, you find out, well, what are people loving? What are the trends? What are influencing kind of the industry? And you look to the bartenders, you look to, everyone who is contributing to this industry, and you see what they're doing. And then I decided to go the opposite way and create something new and just stand in our individuality and be original with the flavors. And so that's pretty much kind of how the rationale behind the flavors that we ended up going with, was to just bring in a new flair, a new flavor into kind of consumer goods, because you see that in the industry. When you go to a bar and you open a bar menu, you see their personality within the menu. And so I wanted the brand itself to have its own personality, and that couldn't speak louder than actually having flavors that spoke more to us as a business and what we were trying to achieve. So
nice. So it sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that where you've arrived at with the kind of flavor profiles that you do have, is it more led on consumer taste than your own personal, or is it a combination of the two?
It's a combination of the two, because I consider myself, all the marketing people, I can hear them screaming when I'm about to say this now, but I consider myself as the first consumer. And that's really because I actually created this for myself more than anything. And so I found that if I liked it, at least I knew it tasted good. It wasn't inedible. And then from there, it was working. And a lot of my family members and friends, they had to taste it as well. But it's being able to separate kind of being a taster versus being a consumer, it's so difficult, because I feel like you kind of have to have both hats on, what tastes good, but also evaluating it from what is commercially interesting and what would actually be something that people would want to part with their money to actually purchase. So you have to have both hats on. Selfishly, I'm always having both hats on, more leaning to myself than anything, but knowing that at least if I like it, somebody in the world has to like it as well.
It makes sense. It makes sense. And even though you're fairly recently in terms of the business launching, if you were to describe your entrepreneurship journey today with a couple of words, maybe 2 or 3, which words would you use?
I think every entrepreneur would say tough or difficult being the first word. And my journey has not been straight lined. I think I've had fewer yeses than I've ever had no's. I think for my success rate is probably less than 1%. I've had a handful of yeses. And I think this process is so tough. It's a lonely road, but that won't be my second word though. It's definitely tough. And for people to understand that you really have to throw your whole self into it. There's no other way. You're almost cheating yourself and wasting your time if you don't commit a level of yourself that probably you've never given to anything in your life. And so it challenges every fiber of your being. And I find that it's probably the best decision that I've ever made, and one of the hardest decisions I've ever made to become an entrepreneur and go down this road. So that would be my first word. I think my second word would probably be humbling. Humbling is probably the second word, but not in the negative sense. I would say humbling because you have this idea and you have something in your mind, and I think I took a step at a time. I never really fully looked to the future to say, okay, this is how I want it to look, and this is how I want to develop it. And so actually having a business and actually having a product and doing what I said I was going to do, and looking back however many years that I started, in my early 20s to now, it's such a humbling feeling to know that, you know, we have a team of 6 or 7 people and they're pushing this business and they believe in it and they see the vision. I think that in itself is such, sometimes I feel like I work for someone else. It doesn't really feel like it's it's me. It's almost like a constant reminder that this started in my uni bedroom many years ago, and now I actually am able to physically hold it. It's something tangible that people can see, and many people for a long time didn't see it. So to actually see it and know and let that thing be kind of almost a testament to the struggle, it's definitely a humbling feeling, that process. And then the last thing is it's exciting. You're doing something different. My experience always is so dynamic, and I never wanted to wake up in the morning and feel like I wasn't doing something that I loved. And so being able to do this actually is such an exciting experience and constant reminder that I get to do what I love, and I get to be in an industry that is doing things that, quite frankly, I didn't even know existed. So yeah, it's very exciting.
Yeah. Tell me this. I mean, you mentioned that you came up with the idea, or, you know, whilst you were at university. When you were studying, were you quite clear at that point that you wanted to be an entrepreneur? Or was it something that since finishing university that you've kind of come to realize and obviously launched the business?
The interesting thing was, this probably was not my first road into entrepreneurship. And anyone who's ever known me knows that my brain, I just think I'm such a curious person, and I'm constantly thinking, and I call myself a solutions provider. So whenever someone tells me a problem, my brain is already working on a solution. And so it was always inevitable that this was the journey that I was kind of going to go down. And when I do get the opportunity to meet people who knew me when I was 15, because it kind of goes back as far back as that, you know, they're not surprised by the fact that this is where I ended up, because I was always kind of talking about kind of my journey and where I wanted to go. But I think, funnily enough, when I was younger, because I was very creative growing up, and I studied the sciences back at college. But when I was younger, I did a stint in acting, and I did extra work, and I saw that all the roles were very specific, and particularly for Black people, were very, very specific. And one thing I hated was to be boxed. One thing that went against every fiber of my being was to be told that I could only do this, and to be told that this is the path that I must go down. And so I was comfortable with uncertainty, and I was comfortable with the idea of doing something risky. And so I knew that something down the line was going to allow me to express myself fully, and I was most likely going to create that opportunity for myself, because I didn't like what was already out there. And so it was always going to be that I was going to do something for myself. I just didn't know what it was going to be.
Oh, super. I find it interesting what you say about, you know, someone that might have met you at 15. And I think when you have either people or references in your past, you really realize that, you know, you are now who you were. Obviously, you've developed and you've grown, but I think that's quite a wonderful thing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. When you look back enough, you tend to see everything that you went through kind of was purposeful to get you to where you're supposed to be. So I 100% agree with that.
Yeah. And so fast forward to where we are here today, launched the business last year. And obviously there is a bit of turbulence around supply chain, around, you know, the economic climate, the list goes on and on. And so how has the current climate changed or not your plans for the future of the business, and how has it impacted you?
Funnily enough, I think one of the supply chain is probably one of the sticking points that we experience. And one thing or misconception that I had, because obviously I was very naive entering into this, was that everything was already developed and that there was not anything that I needed to further do to get it to a point where I bridged the gap to make it work for me. I think there was always a responsibility I knew that the business was going to take on to develop some type of supply chain, and one that was efficient. But I find that actually cold chain, more than anything, is probably one of the most undeveloped out there, especially for smaller brands. It is developed for those who are bigger. But when you're trying to do something that, especially with what we're doing, the way the world has changed, and I noticed that back in many years ago, but e-commerce was always king, and that was always the way that we were going, and kind of democratizing the way that people were able to buy, purchase, and access, and increasing accessibility towards everyday items. I am probably one of the guilty ones and the reason why we're here today. But being able to give people that increased level of convenience and access was key. And so I always knew we were going to do e-commerce with this business. But you find that alcohol, prior to 2020, you really couldn't just purchase alcohol online. And brands particularly weren't just selling their alcohol online. And then you add in that factor of being frozen, and it's just like you just throw a spanner in the works, because we deliver everything frozen. And so we are trying to do what many people before us have basically not considered, not done, and not developed. And so in a way, we are pioneering a lot. And it definitely is dictating how I see the future, and where the future lies for the business in terms of developing further the chain and making sure that it's a lot more sophisticated than what we experience now. And so, yeah, absolutely. Even with e-commerce, we sell the product online. Find it, the people that we work with actually were born from COVID. And it's consequential that actually COVID happened, and we saw a lot of people adapt and kind of change their business models. And so for us, it was always the case. We were always going to do this, but actually finding ways and putting contingencies in place to make sure that actually our future is a lot more technologically integrated, and making sure that actually the future speaks to that. And so, yeah, I think for me, looking forward, it's about making sure that we adapt, and making sure that we have those in place so that people can access us at any time, with increased accessibility, with increased convenience, and making sure that we also kind of integrate that into people's everyday lives is kind of the ultimate goal, really. And yeah, I think, supply chain forever the sticking point, but it's the beast that excites me, to be honest.
Well, you've led me into the next question I was going to ask you, actually, about what excites you. What excites you about hospitality at the moment, and where it's heading, and the drinks industry?
I honestly think that my generation excites me. What we're doing right now, the glass ceilings that we're breaking, the audacity that we have, it just excites me. But just speaking to kind of my identity, and speaking to seeing a lot more young Black entrepreneurs getting into the space and dominating it and commanding attention, and seeing things that we would never have seen 10 years ago coming into market, that makes me so proud, and that makes me so excited for the future. And God, I can't wait to see kind of how it develops. But for me personally, and what I'm trying to do really is just change the face of alcohol. It's such a big feat, and it's such something that I don't know, quite frankly, how we're going to do it. We have plans, but just knowing that if these are the plans that I have, and I know myself kind of what people are ideating and what they're working on and how that's going to come into market within the next few years, that's definitely something I look forward to witnessing for sure.
Nice, exciting. And any ambitions you're keen to share with us for the future for your business?
World domination. Absolutely going global. We're very excited about getting into kind of many markets outside of the UK, and that's kind of been the plan from the beginning. Our product exists in climates that are a lot more favorable, but it was so important to me to launch in London, one of the hardest places, quite frankly, to launch a business, just because of the people, just because of so many different things. But knowing that being accepted as the brand that we are in the UK, and then knowing that and then being able to replicate that outside is definitely something that I really can't wait. And it's more imminent later in 2023. And I can't wait to start setting roots in lots of different kind of markets within the world. Very exciting.
Nice. It is. World domination. That stuck with me. Good luck.
But locally, actually, let me add, locally too, because I'm based in Manchester, and I think I want to emphasize and start to elevate a lot more things that are going on as well in Manchester. So I think 2023 for me as well is going to be kind of championing other businesses within Manchester and making sure that the food scene is being supported much more as well. So global ambition, but still trying to do a lot more in Manchester for sure.
I hear you. Super. Thank you so much, Grace. Thanks for answering those questions. We've come to the near end of the interview, but we have a quick fire round just so we can get to better know you, a bit more about who you are and what you like. So we'll start with what your favorite smell is.
My favorite smell. My favorite smell, if it's food, it's probably chili peppers, because it just reminds me so much of home. And in everything we cook, even if it probably shouldn't have any chili in it, it's probably there. So I think I love the smell of chilies. It's got a sweetness, but it's the spice, it's everything. I think it encompasses all of Western African culture, quite frankly.
Yes, it does indeed. What's your favorite season?
Oh, I love winter. I love the cold. I do. I'm one of the few, I think, but I love winter. I love the season generally, just because it's that time where there's a lot of festive things going on, and just I love the crispness of the air. I think it's got more to do with my school days probably, but it does. It gives me comfort. I don't know why. I feel like I should love the summer, and I do for business, but personally, I love winter.
What's your favorite number?
My favorite number is 15. And that's, oh God, this is going to sound so shallow. It's because it's the day that I was born, but now 15, funnily enough, 15 is XV in Roman numerals. And that was actually the beginning of the name of the business. So that has always been, the reason 15, I was born on the 15th of June and the 30th. And so it's the middle and it's the heart. So that's kind of, I always see the number 15 as kind of the heart of everything that I do. So that's why it's not just because it's the day that I was born.
So it's not shallow at all. And actually quite a few people I've interviewed have said they don't have a favorite number. And I have a favorite number, which is also the date of my birth. However, fantastic. I'm born in June too, but I'm the 6th of the 6th. So number 6 is my favorite number. So I understand. I haven't used it for any good though, but
oh, you will. You will. Trust me.
At some point soon. What's your favorite time of the day?
Oh, I love the night. I love nighttime. Again, it's that comfort thing. When it's dark, I tend to find that I'm a lot more productive at nighttime than in the morning.
Really?
But I'm an early riser, so I still wake up at
Oh,
6. If
yeah,
people
yeah.
think that's early, I still wake up at 6, but I tend to do a lot of my brain activity is just
Mm,
a lot more. I'm sharper. I tend to be so much more productive at night.
nice, interesting.
And the best things happen at night.
Again, sorry, the best things.
The best things happen at night too. So just nighttime, nightlife, all of that.
Yeah. I hear you. Favorite color?
I'm surprised to know that it's green because when I
Mm.
looked in my wall, honestly, I have a lot of green trinkets, like green spotted around, but
Oh,
I love black. Black,
do you?
even though
Yeah,
people always say black's a shade,
yeah.
fine, then I'll pick green is definitely a color that I always gravitate towards. I just think it's just such a comfort. I love anything that makes me feel comfort, makes me feel safe. And I feel like green is just
Mm,
one of those colors that I tend to just gravitate towards. And I love your
nice.
green part, so that also
Thank
helps.
you. I really do love green as well. I've got a lot of green clothes and setting myself on some emeralds next. I just love everything green and the shades of green. But anyway.
Absolutely.
Favorite drink?
Homage to the alcohol world, it's got to be a spicy margarita. I'm a
Is
spicy
it
margarita
really?
girl.
Okay.
Absolutely. I love a spicy margarita. Anything tequila
Yeah,
is me.
yeah. Nice, super duper. And with that, we have come to the end of the interview. So thanks, Grace, for joining me this evening. It's been great speaking to you, and we're looking forward to just seeing your journey as your business
Oh,
continues to blossom. So all the best for that. And thank you all for joining us this evening for Thursday Night Takeaway. As I said at the beginning, we will be back in a fortnight's time in the same place at 7 p.m. So we will see you then. Thank you and take care. Bye.